I can't believe we're more than halfway through 2023 and already we've seen lots of interesting developments in payments this year. But what are the topics that merchants really need to be keeping an eye on? Let's find out in this episode of Navigating Digital Payments.
Welcome to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline, bringing you the latest innovations, trends, and predictions about the future of payments.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Navigating Digital Payments podcast. I'm David Daly. I look after the Discovery Hub here at Worldline, and I'm thrilled to have with me today two fantastic guests to look at this topic of what should merchants be watching out for in the second half of 2023. Firstly, we have Jeff Barraclough. He is the founder of the Business of Payments blog and newsletter, after having 10 years plus experience in senior roles at commercial acquirers across Europe. If you're interested in signing up to his newsletter, which I can say is filled with really useful and current insights, then just visit businessofpayments.com and you can sign up there. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
And we also have our regular guest, practically co-host, Ina Kostiuk, who is the Global Partner Manager for the Merchant Services part of the Worldline business. Ina, great to have you with us again.
Hello, everybody. My pleasure always to join you.
So for this episode, we're going to enter uncharted waters. We're going to try something a little bit different. We have a list of 7 different topics that I'd like to go through. And for each one, I'd like to come to you, Jeff, and ask you for a short observation or insight about it, and then very directly ask you whether you think merchants need to be watching this topic closely, and if so, what action they might need to be taking or thinking about taking right now. And the topics we're going to go through are checkout-less stores, open banking, the cashless society, soft POS solution, ISVs, cryptocurrencies, and generative AI. So lots to get through. Let's dive straight in. So, Jeff, checkout-less stores.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because Amazon have been leading this with Amazon Go. So this is the concept where you scan a QR code with an app to get into a store. Then you just pick up the goods from the shelves and walk out, and it builds your account. And we've seen Auchan and Rive and Aldi in Europe open these stores. A lot of convenience stores in Poland now work this way. So I think it's probably something that, merchants across the continent are looking at. I mean, there's a question as to whether scanning a QR code on the app is the right way of getting in. But I definitely this is a thing.
And it's funny, in the Discovery Hub, we did some research into this. We conducted a survey, and one of the conclusions we reached is that there is, for consumers, a sort of trust aspect to get over, because of course up until a few years ago, walking into a shop, picking something up and then walking out again was called stealing and was definitely against the law. And so for some people, I think it's still quite a jump to imagine that that's now a perfectly legitimate way to shop. And I can also imagine that where you already have, say, self-checkout happening and people are already accustomed to that, it's maybe less of a leap towards fully autonomous stores than it is if you're used to if you pay in cash and you're used to always dealing with a person at the shop.
At the same time, one of the benefits for merchant using checkout less is to have loss prevention along with the data collection and fast checkout process in general. So we see a lot of benefits for merchants, but as you say, David, mental change for consumers.
But they are very expensive to implement, and they are a little bit exclusionary. So a typical supermarket or convenience store's customer base, there'll be quite a lot of people who, for various reasons, won't be able to access this model. So I'm not entirely convinced it's going to be mass market, but definitely it's one for pilots and trials in the next 12, 18 months. And there are vendors who can now provide this for people.
I completely agree with you, because the cost of technology like sensors and computer visionary and integration of all and AI definitely is much higher than labor cost.
But I'm wondering whether there might be a kind of halfway house, which is a smart cart. So this is the model where the shopping cart has the sensors, not the shelves. So you put your goods into the shopping cart, it recognizes what you put into the shopping cart, and then you pay using a conventional PIN pad attached to the cart itself using a card or Apple Pay. And I see Carrefour have reportedly ordered 5,000 of these. So they're clearly quite interested. So I'm wondering whether this might be a slightly lower cost way of achieving the same result, but also it offers a range of options for shoppers, so they could still use the normal checkout if they wanted to, but an autonomous option is available to them.
Okay, let's come on to the next topic then. Open banking.
So open banking, I mean, look, long-term, big picture, it seems logical that everyone's going to pay with bank transfers rather than by cards, because it's a simpler process and should be the future. However, we have had the availability of the open banking APIs for a little while now. In the UK, even longer, because the UK open banking was mandated by the Competition Authority before PSD2 happened. But it's not really taking hold for payments, and I think the industry's begun to question why that is. My view is that two things have slightly gone wrong. One of them is that the commercial model has looked like free, and if a product is free, there's less incentive for anybody to invest in building a customer experience around it. But more importantly, there's no industry scheme or bank consortium or kite mark or marketing campaign around open banking to tell consumers and shoppers this might be a way that you choose to pay. So instead of clicking the pay by credit card button or the pay by PayPal button, there's another button that you could pay. Just in the UK, to give you an example, on a NatWest checkout page, it's called Pay It. On a Barclays merchant checkout page, it's called Bank Pay. If you want to pay your taxes by open banking in the UK, you hit the Pay by Bank Account button. I mean, it's just confusing. We never had this with contactless. There was an industry communication scheme throughout the world based on common standards. So we need that kind of action to get this moving.
At the same time, I do see a lot of benefits for merchant, and especially for smaller type of partners who can actually complete information with the data through the open banking. And I agree with Jeff that it's not communicated, and for normal human being, it's actually really unclear what is the open banking, what to do with that, except that they really started to be afraid for our data because they know that they need to give the consent to somebody sometimes when they purchase online something, or if they open the page, they really started to be worried about their data, but they're not really educated how to use it.
Yeah, and the key benefit to merchants, which is it's cheaper and you get paid faster and there's no chargebacks, are not benefits for shoppers. So to get shoppers to come across the chasm, they're going to need either an incentive. I mean, clearly there are some applications where merchants control the customer experience and customers want to buy the product and they'll do what they have to do. I think the other thing for European merchants is to understand is that it is very different in each country because it depends on the existing e-commerce payment landscape. So in markets in Central and Eastern Europe, in Germany, in Poland and Czech and so on, where consumers are used to already paying by bank transfers online, slightly different methods in each country, the evolution is going to be very different to in Western European markets, so Spain or UK, Ireland, where people are used today by paying by card, a debit card or a credit card. And the banking systems or the views of local banks are also very different. I mean, certainly people in Czech and Poland tell me that the PSD2 APIs provided by the banks are not yet as good as the old direct integrations that existed to provide online bank transfers. In Germany, Sofort is still pretty dominant. In Holland, Ideal, although clearly behind the scenes they could move to some of these open banking APIs as well. So, as one industry figure put it, quote, nobody's leading it and there's no money in it, quote, which is why it's moving very slowly. Do merchants need to worry about it? Again, it's one to dip your toe in the water and talk to your existing vendors and ask them what they can provide. And maybe, particularly if you're selling high value things that people would normally be buying on a debit card, I think there's use in thinking about whether an open banking transaction might be a better way of doing it. I think the challenge is, so for cars is a good example, right? If you're spending 20,000 euros on a car on a debit card, that could easily be an open banking online transfer. However, the people selling cars want to have a conversation with the customer about credit. So they don't want to make the process too frictionless because they want to have a conversation about, can they lend you the 20,000, right? I suppose the other advice I give to merchants is check that your vendor is well funded, because there's a huge number of startups that have got into the open banking API aggregation industry or market. I think a number of them are running out of road for financing. So make sure if you're committing long-term to a vendor, that vendor has long-term capital available to it to continue to supply the service.
And your answers remind me of two things. One, the conversation we had with Angelo Cacci about Our Card's Dead, Ina, where he really emphasised that payments, it's not just about the mechanical transfer of funds from one person to another. It's the branding, it's the business model that makes it attractive for all of the parties. It's that the managing of disputes. It's what protection do you provide for buyers and sellers. And I guess what you're saying, Jeff, is that a lot of that is perhaps not quite there, or is still at its infancy when it comes to
it
open
won't
banking
be there
payments.
unless banks, ideally with merchants, get together and produce something that looks like a scheme. And I suppose the other thing on pricing, I think pricing will land roughly where debit is. So this will end up being roughly 20 basis points plus a little bit. That's not a problem, I don't think, but because people need to get remunerated for the work that they do and for moving money around. That should encourage the industry to focus on customer experience. So the best thing about open banking payments should be to provide a better customer experience than cards, not a cheaper customer experience than cards.
So coming on to another topic which we have discussed on a few podcast episodes before, the cashless society. What's your take on that, Jeff?
Well, it's fascinating because I went to a conference recently on another topic, but there was pickets outside the conference. So there were people with banners who were angry, and they were angry about COVID vaccines. They were angry about what in England we call low traffic neighbourhoods, which is basically reducing traffic in local areas, and they were angry about cashless society. So it's become part of this generalised conspiracy theory on the internet and elsewhere, where people are just generally angry about stuff. And one of the things that they're generally angry about is the squeezing out of cash. I mean, look, the less cash that's used, the more expensive it becomes to merchants, the less merchants want to take it, and therefore the less cash is accepted. You can have a public policy approach which is trying to maintain access to cash, or in my view, a better one would be one that maintains access to digital money, because not being able to access digital money is highly exclusionary. You pay more for stuff if you haven't got a debit card or a credit card. You also pay more for stuff. I mean, I'm a bit concerned sometimes. I see many proposals for financial inclusion, business ideas that involve a prepaid debit card, which has quite high fees attached to it. So people are still getting charged, in my view, excessively for not having enough money to have a genuine account. So yeah, I would definitely try and steer this towards how can we give everyone the benefit of electronic money.
I've checked actually statistic of European bank, and I was very surprised to see that more than 60% of people still would insist to have access to cash. Even more than 55% of people are using cards to pay. So it means even they're using credit card or debit card, they want to have a choice. It's here to stay, and we would have more growing number of payment methods, but cash for me here to stay for sure for a while.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. In the Nordics, or Sweden certainly, I think in the UK, we're seeing less and less cash. Cash machines, so ATM machines, now get 27 pence per transaction. Used to be 40 pence. So as the operators get less money, they charge more for cash withdrawals. That also diminishes the attraction of cash. We're seeing more thefts. So there's a big story at the weekend of a lot of ATM thefts in Germany. And there was that huge shift during COVID where we saw probably 10 percentage points of the population shift from analog to digital. Look, there are issues. What about inclusion that we mentioned? What about choice? I'm less excited about the choice argument, but inclusion definitely. And resilience. So central banks are nervous about this because, imagine Visa and MasterCard fell over. What would we do? And the local debit systems. So cash is a serious tool to allow the economy to continue trading. I think that's where CBDCs come in, central bank digital currencies, as an offline digital cash idea. The Bank of England is working with the BIS on that one. Interesting paper came out a couple of weeks ago. They're calling it Britcoin, which I think is quite a nice way of phrasing it. So Britcoin is one to watch. In terms of merchants, I think this is really a matter of choice for merchants, right? Everybody knows their own customer base. My local sports club that I'm a member of has gone cashless. People complained a bit, but we're making more money because the staff are stealing less from the till. so I mean, it's this is every merchant's got to make its own decision based on its own customer base. But the options, I think, are all there and pretty well understood.
And just a couple of things to reflect on there. We have talked about the kind of inclusion aspect quite a lot on the podcast before. I was thinking, of course, in the UK, Jeff, cash acceptance is not mandatory. And indeed, our last holiday at Center Parcs, they have completely eliminated cash, even for vending machines and machines that would take just 50 pence. Everything is now fully cashless there. But of course, in other countries, in some countries, cash acceptance remains mandatory, and it's not at least today a choice for merchants. I also saw some friends, and we were at a bar last week, and I was incredibly surprised. And I've just reached for this now, and I'm showing it to Jeff and Ina. I know our listeners can't see it, but to find a flyer saying "Keep Cash Alive" and then listing a number of reasons why cash remains important. And some of them are, many of them are actually quite serious. Although one is that without cash, we wouldn't have tooth fairies anymore. I don't know if this is familiar to Ina and other cultures, but in the UK, when children, lose a tooth, they put it under their pillow, and the next morning the tooth fairy has left a £1 coin for them. So I don't know whether there needs to be some kind of prepaid card solution for tooth fairies from payment providers, but it's definitely one I think at Worldline we'll try and get added to the roadmap. So, moving on from the cashless society, next topic, soft POS solutions. And Jeff, it might just be worth starting even by explaining what soft POS means, because I guess that's a bit of a payment industry term that might not be familiar to everyone.
It is a bit. But actually, I think it's just part of a slightly wider technology trend, which is really interesting in-store technology operations. So one is the ubiquity of Android. So all the in-store technology is moving from Windows to Android if it's not got there already. And Android payment devices are now commonly on the market, and they can be provisioned with other applications as well as a payment application. So the same device can be a payment terminal, but also can have the ECR software or the till software or the merchandising software or whatever. What's now new is a thing called soft POS, which is that any Android device can be provisioned with an application which turns it into a payment terminal. So you don't need to buy a special payment terminal from Ingenico or Verifone or Pax or whatever. Any Android device you've got, You download the software from a particular provider, and that becomes a payment application. Now, this has been pushed very heavily, I think, by the schemes as a micro-merchant solution. So this democratizes payments. You no longer need to buy a payment terminal to take money. You just need to download an application onto your phone, and you can take money from anybody who has a card or a Apple Pay on their own device. I'm less excited about that. And I'm less excited about that because in the 7 years it's taken SoftPOS to get from the prototype to market, we've seen this huge growth in low cost card reader propositions. So people like SumUp will offer for €30 a card reader, right? So if any business in Europe that wants to take money on cards can afford €30. If you can't afford €30, you really haven't got a business. So I think everybody who wants one's got one. So I'm not sure SoftPOS is going to take the market that much further, certainly in Europe. My excitement is much more about the enterprise application of SoftPOS, because an example in my old world we had with a train operating company. The guard on the train has to carry an Android device which he uses to calculate the fares, a payment terminal to take money, and a printer. So he's carrying 3 devices. With SoftPOS and Android, you can collapse that into one device, which is simpler, it's much lighter to carry, and potentially transformational in what you can do. Similarly, in in-store operations, you're no longer bound by having all this technology at till points. You can put it on one device, which is light enough for the staff to carry around and be where the customers are. So I think SoftPOS is quite exciting, but maybe not quite in the way it's being pitched.
Interesting, because it's one of the most exciting topic for me. And as I work with partners, and we observe that partners really demanding it for mass market, not necessarily for absolutely micro merchant, but convenience store, mass market, and especially for HoReCa sector. Because on the restaurant now, you can see waiters are going with a tablet already attached to their hand, and usually it's Android device where they can do an order per each table, and then they want to have incorporated their payment as well, so that everything, all service for clients would be faster. And it's also easier for waiters. They don't have to go fetch for terminals, find where it is, drop it, etc. So it's always all on one hand. So I would see in this space, an enterprise, definitely, I see quite a lot of potential and growth.
It is potentially huge. And I love the fact that all the kit becomes lighter, because we underestimate, if you're working all day and having to carry the kit on you, in a restaurant or in a warehouse or a train, it's actually quite heavy. I was just going to a slight word of warning, which is that SoftPOS is still quite slow, so it's not ready for a supermarket application, for example. It can't do lots of quick transactions. And then the other thing I would highlight to your listeners is that there's a big announcement 2 weeks ago about Apple. So Apple now offer this on their devices, which is really shifting the dial in the US. The US being 70% Apple and 30% Android. Europe is pretty much the other way around. So it's very rare to find Apple kit in a merchant environment facing customers. It does happen. I mean, there is some, but it's much less transformatory in retail in Europe as that announcement is in the US. One very positive development for merchants is that a number of the large integrators, I mean, Worldline is one, have either built or acquired SoftPOS capability to build that into their overall proposition. Because I think it's very difficult for merchants if new technology comes along as a point solution from a new set of vendors. Makes it difficult, obliges them to do the integration work and the vendor selection in areas where maybe they're not comfortable. I think in the next 12 months, this technology is now readily available, deployable, and merchants can probably buy it from their existing suppliers they're comfortable with.
So I think interesting to hear from both of you, really, that it is an exciting development, but maybe where once this was envisaged as the low-cost alternative to a dedicated POS terminal, actually now it's more about not having to have multiple devices and for them being light enough that you're not tied to one location in the store. You can move around the shop or the restaurant with them. Let's now come on to the next topic, which is ISVs, which I think is another one, Jeff, that you probably have to start by just clarifying what that means.
Yes, so anyone following the payment industry will know that it's got obsessed with these three letters, ISV. It stands for Independent Software Vendor. And the term goes back to the days of when there was Microsoft, SAP, and Oracle, and that was basically the software industry. And then small companies developed around these big companies to develop point solutions that worked on around these ecosystems, and they were known as ISVs. The payment industry basically uses the term to describe any organization that sells software. Could be point of sale software at the till, could be CRM, could be e-commerce platforms, could be merchandising, could be anything really. And increasingly, the software companies see value in offering payments as an integrated bundle with their software offer. So previously, and when I used to work in the software industry, in retail software, and we would provide payments and a payment terminal or an e-commerce platform or whatever as part of our overall bundle to provide a full solution to our customers. But we couldn't make any money out of it. It was really a pass-through, and just provided a service headache actually, because when I remember once with a big client, our payment subcontractor lost the settlement file, and it's clear the merchant is shouting at us because we're the prime contractor, but then we shout at our subcontractor, say where's the settlement file? I mean, they found it in the end, but it took 3 days, and it was a lot of money that was kind of sat there. But now with cloud, so the business software is now cloud-based. The payment solutions are now generally cloud-based as well. So the integration of the two is much, much easier. And the commercial integration has also happened as well. So the software guys know they can make money out of this because the payment industry will pay significant commissions to software businesses that can deliver them customers. So we're seeing a lot of interest in vertically integrating that. And that now aligns with a change in buying behavior from merchants, particularly small merchants, who are now asking, I want a payment service that works with my software. Whereas previously they would ask for a payment service that worked with their bank. And that is catalyzing in the payment processing and acquiring sector a change in distribution model. So they're less excited about partnering with banks and more excited about partnering with software vendors, which I think is where that's where you come in, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, because we see that merchant looking, especially for simplification, they're looking into one type of partner or several, like ISVs, who can take the biggest portion of the unknown part, and especially payment. And ISVs growing significant interest to have a profit from payment providers as well.
So, I mean, I guess the implication for merchants, word of caution here, as ever, the experience you get from taking an integrated payment bundle from your software provider is very good. You get a much better experience for your customers and for yourself. It's much simpler. However, right, you are tying yourself to a single provider for a large chunk of your business, and that can mean that you can become a hostage. And that's where I think we just need to be careful. There's always a balance in procuring technology in business. You can buy point solutions, the best of breed from every part of the market, or you can work with a small number of suppliers that integrate best of breed behind the scenes. But you are beholden to them, and there is a risk of putting too many eggs in one basket.
So I think what's really great there is to draw out, on one level, this is something that the payments industry is interested in, and it's essentially about how payments is taken to market, I would say. But on the other hand, as you say, there is a consideration for merchants, which is how many eggs do you want to put in one basket, essentially. And that you may well get easier, tighter integration, but it doesn't come for free. In a minute, I want to come on to a topic that a few years ago would have been the buzzword of the day and now has seen somewhat of a winter, I think it's fair to say, which is cryptocurrencies. Just before we do come on to that, I want to remind people that if they want to get in contact with the podcast, let us know topics you'd like us to cover, or give us any other feedback, you can reach us by emailing ndp-podcast@worldline.com. And of course, if you haven't already, then please take a moment to subscribe. Then you'll never miss a new episode, and also leave us a rating and a review. So, Jeff, cryptocurrencies.
I've been a skeptic for a long time on this one. It was quite clear that cryptocurrencies are a speculative asset class. They're not a means of exchange. They were never much used for buying things. And I think that's now clear. It's such a disappointment because the amount of brain power and money that were into this, I assumed like the space program came out with Teflon. I assumed that they'd come out with some, not cryptocurrencies, but something else would come out of this that would be some use to humanity. But I mean, it simply hasn't happened. They built a casino, which is fine. I mean, nothing wrong with casinos, provided that you know it's a casino and you know what the odds are. But really haven't developed out of the whole crypto wave anything useful. It's a real shame. So, I mean, Andreessen Horowitz estimate there's still 30,000 developers worldwide working on crypto products. So there's still money and brain power going into this, and I do hope they'll come out with some useful products. But, the governor of the Bank of Ireland described unbacked crypto as a Ponzi scheme. Crypto ATMs, the UK FCA described them as a key component in the facilitation of money laundering and the movement of funds gained through criminal activity. This should be regulated as gambling, not as investments. I'm really concerned there's a move in some countries to have the local regulator, like BaFin in Germany or the FCA in the UK, regulate crypto. You put that on advertisements, say regulated by BaFin, people think it's safe. It's not. It should be regulated by the Gambling Commission. It's a casino, which is fine, right? But it's no use for buying things, right?
But one follow-on question. So I kind of, in general, I'm agreeing with you, Jeff, that crypto as a means of payments, let's say, has not really panned out well for numerous reasons. In the last Navigating Digital Payments report, which is now almost 2 years old, we did conclude that its impact is more political, meaning that CBDCs, which may or may not end up being based on blockchain technology, to be clear. So it's not so much a technological influence, but politically are to some degree a reaction to cryptocurrencies.
Well, there we are. I mean, the world's bankers got frightened by Libra, when Facebook was about to launch a cryptocurrency. But I think where we are now is that they're probably less excited about this, and I think the world's the public of the world still realise that actual dollars are probably the best thing to have in your bank account, right? That's what I go for. Give me proper real dollars.
So going from something that was at the top of the hype curve a few years ago to something that's perhaps at the top of the hype curve now, what are your thoughts on the topic of generative AI, Jeff?
Well, I think you missed one, David, because we did pass through the metaverse briefly on the way from crypto to generative AI. But anyway, we've now, I think we've all put the metaverse behind us, and it's generative AI. I mean, to some extent, I mean, we laugh, but it's the same folk who were evangelizing about blockchain and crypto and then the metaverse who are now occupying the airwaves and the screens telling us about the 10 reasons why AI needs to be top of your list for 2024. So there is an element of hype. Look, I mean, the payment industry has been using AI for years for fraud screening. That, for example, that's not news. I'm quite a practical person. Advice for merchants and anybody with a large organization, a large customer service organization, is you probably have hired lots of people in your customer service organization to talk to customers, and they're probably very good at talking to customers. They probably spent a lot of time writing emails to customers. They're probably not very good at writing emails. the AI can write the emails to your customers for you. You write a draft email, just bang it out, tell the AI to put this in customer-friendly language, check it, out it goes. It's a huge improvement. So that's my kind of very practical thing in the next 6 months to try with regard to generative AI.
So from my perspective, I see that generative AI is really booming across all continents, and we definitely can say it's a bit of a boom. And recently in Silicon Valley, they estimated number of startup working, and they realized for a few years it raised from 80 startups to 8,000, more than 8,000 startups working on it. Definitely, they're not going to survive all of them across like next few years. However, it's clear that everybody afraid to miss the train, to be like to have a advantage of being a first mover advantage, and we could see that the biggest merchants, or especially in retail space, they're trying. So my advice, especially for large retails, would be try to evaluate. Not necessarily put all your eggs in the same basket, just to have very small steps and with different partners of fintechs.
Yeah, so I think that's wise advice. If a tool is free, it's free for a reason, and people need to be very careful about what information you put into the free AI tools, because it goes into the cloud and you lose control of it. So be very careful about putting customer data there. So I would recommend any merchants listening to pay for a service and make sure that the right data protocols are in place about where your customer information is handled and so on. But with that in mind, Ina's dead right. Now's the time to practice and play around.
You mentioned the application in kind of customer service, Jeff. And so we saw some research that looked at the efficiency saving for writing. And typically you can say, writing something involves some research, preparing a draft, and then redrafting. And usually there's a bit of a, it's 1/3 for each typically. And of course, what they found was that using generative AI makes that preparation of the first draft much faster, and it slightly reduces the research time, but actually the redrafting time went up. And I think overall it gave a sort of 40% boost. Now, honestly, 40% is still huge. Do you see what I mean? It's massive. But I think some people have this idea that generative AI takes you from spending 10 hours to doing it in 10 seconds. And it's
not that radical. I think the radical nature is its ability to be empathetic. So you can write dear customer, thank you for getting in touch. We had a service failure. You've asked for a refund. I'm terribly sorry you can't have one. It's not against our policy. Mm-hmm. Typical email, right? You can get the AI to recraft that in a much more customer-friendly way, which empathizes with the service failure. I'm terribly sorry for the problems we've caused. I know how difficult this is all this kind of stuff, which service agents often forget to put in because they're enforcing the rules. So, it's not going to eliminate your service team, but it should mean they can spend more time on the phone to customers doing what they're good at, which is talking, and less time writing stuff, which they probably aren't as good at.
If it's as part of a longer conversation, generative AI can even tailor that language and tone, not just to a customer, but to the individual person, because how I would like a problem explaining to me is probably different to how Ina would like it explaining to her, which is different to how you would like it explaining to you, Jeff.
That's why everybody need to learn already how to write prompt, because it's going to be key for use to work with the generative API.
So now is usually the point where I would give a quick summary of everything that we've discussed, but I'm not even going to try, because I think it's been so wide-ranging and covered such a lot of ground that I think no summary could possibly do it justice, except perhaps to say I think it was really nice to go through these subjects, some perhaps seeing a lot of buzz and hype at the moment, and some perhaps a little bit more obscure, but really for each one distill out at least whether merchants should be thinking about it now, and also what should they be doing about it now. So thank you so much for this session. Jeff, really appreciated having you with us.
like to be here. And if you've found it useful, please visit businessofpayments.com.
Which, as I said earlier, I can thoroughly recommend, and also the newsletter as well, if you want to stay up to date on developments in the payments world, a really useful resource. And Ina, of course, also thank you to you for joining us again for the podcast.
Thank you very much, everybody. It was I was delighted because it was really new, interesting format, and it was quite exciting for me.
Thank you again. And that just leaves me finally to thank you, our dear listeners, for joining us this time as we navigated digital payments.
Thank you for listening to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline. Join us next time to learn more about the latest innovations, trends, and predictions for the future of payments.